Ready to go tonight? Everybody turned on? Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. I want everyone to know that Alyssa Cook will be breaking in today to learn the ropes. And so maybe be a little understanding if we get in a tight spot, and Angela's here shadowing her, so everything should go well. Now, I call upon the secretary to read the meeting notice.
The Board of Directors of the School District of the City of Erie, PA will meet in special session on Wednesday, August 26, 2020 at 1 p.m. in an online format to consider the status of athletics and extracurricular activities for the 2020-2021 school year and the interim health care temperature screening agreement by request of the President, John C. Harkins.
Thank you. And now the roll call.
Ms. Sheridan? Here. Mr. Spagel?
Here.
Tyler Titus?
Here.
Ms. Cooley?
Here.
Mrs. Feeney? Here. Mrs. McNair?
Here.
Mr. Nichols?
Here.
Ms. Pickens?
Here.
Mr. Harkins?
Here. Thanks everyone for attending and participating. Everyone would now recite the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First up is hearing of citizens. I'll ask the secretary, do I understand correctly that no citizens asked to be heard today at today's meeting?
Correct.
Thank you. The new business, we have 3 items this afternoon, and I intend to take them one at a time. And the first one is the temperature screening agreement with Interim Healthcare of Pittsburgh Incorporated. May we have a motion to consider and discuss approval of that motion, that resolution?
Mr. President,
Darlene?
Alyssa, I hate to do this to you, but I would like us to consider tabling this because this is something that we were going to discuss on September 2nd. And to be honest, I really haven't had the opportunity to go through the information that has been given to us by the superintendent. And I feel a little bit unprepared for this vote today.
Well, that was the original plan, Darlene. It has to be approved by the 8th. So that's why we had planned to do this on the 2nd, but because this meeting was called today, in consultation with the superintendent, he and I agreed that he should bring it here. But does anybody else want to weigh in on this?
I would second that motion.
Well, it's not a motion. If enough of you just don't want to do it, we'll wait till the 2nd unless the superintendent or the solicitor has a reason not to.
Mr. President, I'd like to hold off.
Okay, that's 3 of you. Is there anything you want to tell us about it, Mr. Superintendent, or can you wait till the 2nd on this?
Well, the only reason we wanted to get it approved, so they won't start doing the screenings without a contract in place. So we wanted to make sure we got that done in time for the start of school so that they're available to help with the screening of our special ed students as well as the CTC students.
And you and the solicitor have reviewed and digested what's involved with the contract and are comfortable with it?
Yes, and we brought this based on some concerns that were raised by the board, just to ensure that we had enough coverage for the nurses for the screenings and some additional help during the day.
Well, I'd be inclined to support it, but if a majority of the board doesn't want to consider it, that's what we'll have to do. But before we can consider it, we need a motion to approve it, and we don't have that yet. So if anyone else wants to move that and second it,
I want to get a Mr. President.
Yes, Angela.
I want to give a motion to approve it. I don't want to wait on anything that has to do with the COVID safety and temperature screening. I feel like the contract needs to go ahead and people need to start being screened, and we don't want to wait till the second, and there might be some type of hiccup or something. If we do it now, it could be ironed out before the school year starts without the contract, to have that additional support. I don't see a problem with it, and I want a motion to approve it.
All right, so Angela's moving it. If there's a second, then we will.
Mr. President,
Mr. Fagel?
I agree with Angela, and I'd like to second the motion.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. McNair and seconded by Mr. Spagel. Now we can discuss it, and those of you who don't want to proceed with it still have the option to vote to delay it. But since it's been moved and seconded, we can discuss it. So,
Mr. President,
Mr. Nichols? Now before we start today, I just want to say I'm going to try to pay close attention to our rule about the 10-minute total and the 2 times per board member. I don't want to be harsh about it, but I just want to make everybody stop and think. So that's all, Sumner. I just want to see that quick.
yeah, like Darlene, I've not had an opportunity to review that, and so we're all a little uncomfortable voting, but I certainly agree with Angela that this is important to have in place. But I guess the question I have is, I don't have an idea of what the cost is of that, or why our school nurses can't do this. And I'm sure Brian can explain that, and I'd appreciate that.
Okay, Mr. Superintendent?
Again, this is something I believe we've been talking about for the last couple months, that there was some concerns raised that our nurses would not be able to cover the day-to-day type of issues with students, as well as any COVID issues that come up. And certainly at Erie High, with 900 students projected to come back for CTC, it'd be very difficult for 1 or 2 nurses to get the screenings done in a timely basis. So I believe, and Mr. Brockman, if you could weigh in on this, I think the cost was, we were estimating about $188,000 if we go through the whole year with just Erie High.
That was Erie High, and actually the elementary students coming back in November. The estimated is $188,000.
So we would be committing for the whole year? Or can we cancel this at some point, or?
Mr. President,
Mr. Wachter?
it is my understanding that this contract is, that we will schedule the times that we would like people to be working. There's no automatic scheduling. There's no guarantee of work. This is a staffing agreement where we call them, let them know how many people we need who meet certain qualifications, and then we assign them to certain facilities in order to provide the temperature checks.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions, and I have no objection now.
Thank you, Sumner. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. President, Darlene again. It's just because I do feel that this is extremely important, as has been said by a few of the directors. I just need time to review this, to review who's coming into our buildings. I know this is a company out of Pittsburgh, how this company is going to be screening their employees, what kind of testing are they going to use to screen their employees. I also know that our nurses have very good rapport with the parents, and so I'm wondering why we aren't looking at just adding more nursing services to our district, since that's something that we've been talking about all along for quite some time now. I don't feel comfortable voting for something that I have not reviewed. So I have a lot of questions. I haven't had a chance to even begin to write them all down. Again, I've been working a lot on the athletics. So it was just because I wanted more time.
Rose?
I agree with Darlene. I've reviewed it, but my questions are, why aren't we hiring our own people that maybe we might be furloughed to take the temperature checks? Because we will know where they're coming from and what's going on.
Mr. President,
Angela?
I have a question for you, Brian. What's the name? My first question, what's the name of the company that we're hiring?
It's Interim Healthcare.
Okay, it's Interim. I'm familiar with Interim. their employees work right out of Erie. My sister was an employee for Interim. They also provide like home health care services to people who need them. One being my father. I trust the company. I trust Brian's judgment and administration to know that we need this service in place. As far as I can't even see arguing this. We're providing support to our nursing staff. Obviously, at this time, this is a slippery slope we're riding because of the COVID situation. So hiring some permanent staff that may no longer need to be there or whatever the case may be. I just feel like this is just a support system. They're not acting as our nurses. They're just providing a support. So if nurses are needed at some point, that's fine. I have no objection to that. But at this point, this is more about the health screenings that we asked for. We asked for this. I just feel like the administration is actually giving us something that we actually asked for, and they're trying to set it in place. And I'm not going to hold it up because of anything. When my daughters go to school on September 8th, I want those people from Interim to be there. They live right here in Erie. They're people that are local. The company might be based out of Pittsburgh, but the people are not. They're based right here in Erie. And I want those people there at the door taking temperatures and health screening when my daughters go to school on September 8th. And I'm not going to hold it up. I see no reason to. And I trust the judgment of the administration on this one. And that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Angela.
And may I weigh in quickly as well?
Yes, Brian.
Just want to remind the board again that we've had this conversation a couple months back that we are struggling to fill our existing nursing positions right now. And that's why we decided to head down this path. Natalie, I think we had 2 nurses resign this week. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And then I had another staff nurse resign, and we're posting the job and trying to get additional nurses to fill those positions. But, it's a difficult problem at this moment.
So we want to strive to fill at least the positions that we have in place. But again, this will provide us additional support and some more resources for this as well as substitutes.
Mr. President,
Tyler?
I am somebody who tends to need a little bit longer, like Ms. Feeney had suggested to go through and just kind of really thoroughly process through what's being presented. However, in this case, I'm inclined to step back away from that process just a little bit, as I do think that this is something the board has brought up several times, saying that we know that this is an area we are struggling in. There is a national nurse shortage right now, much like the bus driver stuff that we are running into. And I think that the name of the company is well suited here. I do think that this is an interim kind of fix for us to make sure that we can do the best for our kids and for the teachers and our nurses right now that we are struggling to keep in the district. I think that that's a deeper conversation we have to go into, and that Ms. Feeney and Ms. Sheridan have brought up and advocated wonderfully for the nurses and brought up many great questions. But I do think right now that this is one of the best ways the directors can help them in that process by allowing this to move forward so we can get the schools ready and get these nurses ready in this capacity.
Thank you, Tyler. I am ready to vote in support of this. But I want to be respectful of those board members who feel differently. So if anyone has anything else to express in favor of it, I'll recognize them. And then I'll ask those of you who want to delay this to the second to move to table it until then. I will vote against that table, but I want to allow this process to go through. I think this is a need we have to meet and a problem we can solve today. But I want to respect those of you who feel differently. So if no one else has anything else to say, and one of those board members who wants to delay it until the second wants to move to table it until that time, I'll recognize the motion.
Mr. President, in light of the fact that we have 2 nurses that have resigned this week and a staff nurse, we are not equipped to handle this pandemic moving forward without extra support. I was not aware that we lost 2 nurses and a staff nurse. So with that being said, and with a board member, because I just wanted to research this, that the board member saying that they are familiar with this agency and that they can vouch for the services that they provide. I am fine with removing that motion, or I know we never really tabled it, but I'm fine with moving forward now, as long as we are going to come back and talk about this nursing issue at a later date, because we have been talking about it for a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Darwin. Is there anyone else who wants to comment? If not, we'll have a roll call. Anyone else? Roll call on approving this contract as written before us.
Ms. Sheridan?
No,
Mr. Spiegel?
Yes.
Tyler Titus?
Yes.
Ms. Cooley?
Yes.
Mrs. Feeney?
No,
Mrs. McNair?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
Yes.
Ms. Pickens?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes. I just want to stress again, it's okay to disagree. We have to respect each other's points of view, and we've just done that. So there's no harm in anyone voting the way they did, and there won't be as we go through the other two things on our agenda. The superintendent asked to be recognized first before we have two motions to consider. They would negate, one would negate the other, but one of them is to proceed, permit fall 2020 sports, and one is to cancel them. So before we get to that point, I'll allow the superintendent to weigh in and give us his insights.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to take a moment this afternoon to share where we are as an administration on sports. As we've mentioned over the last couple of meetings, we still have concerns about moving ahead with contacts made by the CDC as high-risk activities. The governor, the PA Department of Education, and the PA Department of Health have all recommended that sports be postponed until at least January 1st, 2021. With that said, we have developed and approved an athletic health and safety plan that does incorporate guidance from the CDC, Department of Health, and the PIAA. We're prepared, if the board decides to move ahead with sports, to implement and enforce that plan. And we will also continue to monitor the guidance and update the plan as necessary. However, if you do decide to move ahead with sports, we are recommending that the board require participants to sign a waiver. And I'd like to turn it over to Attorney Wachter to explain further.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The waiver as considered would be a waiver solely for the purposes of COVID-19. It would identify the risks associated with participation in the sports and have the parents or guardians sign on behalf of the minor children, and any participant who's 18 or older would sign for themselves, indicating that they acknowledge those risks and they waive any rights that they may have with respect to filing suit against the district should they contract COVID-19 as a result of participation in sports. Of course, they would have to prove that they had contracted that during the sporting activity as opposed to somewhere else. So there's always a problem of causation. However, we would recommend that waiver. I will note that we've had the conversation with our insurance carrier, and they agree that while generally the school districts have a certain level of immunity from suits, it's an unprecedented time, and that a waiver would be a reasonable step in light of that. There are more specific issues with respect to legal advice that I can go into that underlie school district liability issues and the issue behind the waiver. That's something that if we want to have that discussion, I'm prepared to have that during the executive session. However, we do believe it to be a best practice to have the waiver at this point should you decide to move forward with sports.
Okay, we're not at that point, but as you just said, you're ready to discuss it when the time comes. Is that all you had to say for the moment, Mr. Superintendent?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to ask all of us to bring our best efforts and our best selves to this discussion and voting today. However, each of us votes, let's respect each other's right to that opinion. It's certainly important stuff to consider on whichever side you lean towards. There's a lot at stake, and could be no less than life-threatening if you want to consider the extreme or the worst case. So, however, anyone who has an opinion on this was elected and has a right to. So let's have the discussion today with the benefit of all the national, state, and regional discussions that have already taken place. We don't need to start over and revisit everything that's involved with the subject. We are unique. We have our own student and citizen population, and we have zip codes within our boundaries that have high rates of incidents. So we can't ignore that. So I also would want to call your attention to the process which Mr. Spiegel did. He had a pertinent couple of questions and he submitted them in advance of the meeting to the solicitor. The solicitor saw that the answer was given and the questions were made known to the rest of us and the answers too. So I would just encourage everyone going forward to do that in advance of a meeting so they can come to the meetings as prepared as possible and we don't come to the meetings unprepared. So there are two resolutions. I was just going to make a suggestion to consider. A citizen suggested to me that whatever else we do, that maybe we want to go a step above if the board does decide to go in the direction of authorizing it, that there's local people who are infectious disease specialists who we could bring in as a consultant to look at our intentions and our procedures and fine tune if necessary. That's just something to consider before the discussion gets going. So we have two resolutions and one is to proceed and one is to cancel. And we'll consider one first. We can take them in the order that they're here. And as I said, whichever one we take first, one will negate the other, but we'll probably act on the other to make it clear what our position is. It's up to you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Spiegel?
I would make a motion to approve item 3.02 that allows.
And I'll second that, Tom.
Thank you.
All right, that's been moved and seconded by Mr. Spiegel, moved by Mr. Spiegel, seconded by Mr. McNair, and that's the one that permits fall 2020 sports and extracurricular activities. I'll read it before we get into it so everyone knows what it says if they don't have it already. Resolved by the Board of School Directors of the School District of the City of Erie that fall 2020 sports and extracurricular activities will be permitted to proceed contingent upon compliance with all school board approved health and safety plans and upon the recognition that the superintendent may, in his discretion, shut down the operations of an athletic team or extracurricular activity should circumstances require that he do so. So I'm sure there's going to be some discussion and we can begin that, but this is the one to proceed with those conditions as expressed in the resolution. Who wants to comment first?
Angela has her hand up.
Angela?
Yeah, I have my hand up. I'll comment and I'm going to be very brief. Tom, motion, I second it. I know there's a lot of questions, concerns. I know a lot of them have been answered, so I'm not even going to ask any questions. I understand the risk. I've understood some risks that have already, been raised during even practices. I feel like parents are very well aware. They're advocating and fighting for this. I feel that that would have been my suggestion, was to have a waiver, just as most places that have a waiver that have children attending, telling and stating. I just want to make sure the wording is very clear that they are bringing their child to participate in these sports at their own risk, even if, whether things happen already before the season started or whatever happens during the season, that they know that this is their choice. This is not on us. This is not on the school board. This is on the parent, knowing that they are allowing their child to participate in these sports with the risk of COVID. If that's what they feel and choose to do, and we don't want to take the sports away from them, we don't want to take the chance of them losing scholarships away from them, and they feel like this is more important than the health and safety of whatever is happening, and they're willing and prepared to deal with the consequences. As you see, I've seconded the motion to approve the sports, and I just want to make sure that our team is making sure it's very clear to the coaches and the students and the parents that the risks are there. So with that being said, I'm just going to stand behind what I said as far as approving sports for the fall at their own risk. And that's pretty much all I can say, because we all know the risk. So that's I won't, unless somebody has a question of me, that's all I have to say is that I'm approving it at their own risk. And that we will, as a school district, take every safety precaution, every safety measure that we are capable of to ensure that everyone stays safe on our end. And if there is an incident that does occur, or if there are incidents that occur, that we have a safety plan in place, that we may have to stop the season. So, I want to make sure everybody keeps that in mind as well. But initially, I'm going to go ahead and say approve it.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate your conciseness on that too. Thank you. You make the point better when you're short and sweet. So I've been trying to tell everybody. Anyway, I mean that respectfully of everyone. Along with what Angela just said, it's probably worth pointing out that we're talking about strictly voluntary activities, sports and the cheerleading and the band, et cetera, all the extracurriculars. This is voluntary activities. Lori, I hear you're requesting.
Yeah, I just have a few questions. So is the waiver, I don't know if this is a question for Brian or for Tim, will the waiver cover the people who come to the games as well? Like this weekend, I went to a game and I had to sign a waiver before even entering the building. Before I could even pay, they made me sign a waiver outside. Is that how that's going to go, Tim?
The governor's guidance for high school sports does not allow spectators.
Okay, so there won't be anyone at any game.
High school or K through 12 sports.
Okay, is there any way we can kind of work on how maybe, I don't know if we have anything that works with like the access channel. Is there any way to get some coverage for the kids while they're playing so that the people who can't attend can at least see, they can at least have some kind of support? You understand what I'm saying? Even though people won't be there, will we be able to do something online? Will there be people to have to hold the games live, not on Facebook Live, like live and stream it some kind of way? Can we do that so then that way people are still seeing and able to do some kind of support in that kind of way? Otherwise, it's going to be all come home and tell me what you did in the game.
That's a very worthwhile suggestion, Laurie. If it gets that far, we should discuss it, but we got to see whether we're going to get that far too.
Okay. Yeah,
Rose?
that's my only questions.
Okay, Rose is next up.
Mr. Superintendent, do we have a plan for extracurricular activities? I know we have a health and safety plan for the sports, but I never got something on extracurricular activities.
So those, the two activities that have competition are band and cheerleading. And I sent some information on that last night. They are doing the same thing as the sports, and they are actually covered under the health and safety plan for athletics. Right now, both of their competitions have been canceled for the year, and they are doing the same thing with the sports where they're practicing outside and social distancing.
Okay, but my question too is I did see that and I did read that, but extracurricular activities on the elementary level are the after-school programs. Am I correct?
All those activities at this point are going to be virtual. That may change as we come through the year, but we would certainly update the board on that because all our students are participating remotely for their education.
Okay, so when they do come back, the elementary students, then we will have a plan for extracurricular activities for them.
I don't think that we would be adopting a formal health and safety plan, but if we do decide to offer those type of services, certainly we would put safety protocols in place that are in line with our district health and safety plan, and can certainly share those with the board if we decide to recommend that we move in that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. President.
Mr. President. Tyler and Sumner.
Just a quick question. Is the administration moving or suggesting that, I guess what's the solution regarding postponement until January?
I'm sorry, Tyler, you cut out.
Repeat that, Tyler?
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to clarify if the administration is seeking the postponement until January. I don't think that that's in these resolutions, but Brian had talked about that in the beginning when he started talking about it. Is that something that he wants to bring forward to the board?
Well, it's ultimately up to us, Tyler, but he can express himself if he wants on this, but ultimately this is something for us to hash out. Brian, did you want to say any more about that?
And we've had these discussions internally. I know myself, Mr. Brockman, Jeremy Misford, who's on the line here that deals with the high school sports, and John Dahlstrand. Me, Neil, and Jeremy are all of the opinion that we're not certain how you can safely conduct competitions for contact sports. And at this point, we would feel more comfortable following the governor's Department of Health and Department of Education guidance on this. However, we certainly understand the concerns that were raised by the board and the position you're in. And again, we can follow the protocols that have been put in place and enforce those. But again, these are high-risk activities. There's no question about it. They're high risk. It increases the possibility that students can get exposed to COVID and take those home. So if the board decides to move ahead with this, again, I think the waiver is a very important part of this.
I'll recognize you next, Sumner, but I want to add to that the resolution itself says that it's done. It would be proceeding with the recognition that the superintendent may, in his discretion, shut down the operations of anything that requires him to do so should circumstances arise. He has demonstrated, and his staff has throughout all of these difficult months we've been through, that he doesn't hesitate to jump in when safety is in question, as he did with the ventilation and the reason for us to step back from our hybrid plan. So I'm just saying he's a caring citizen, a capable administrator, and he's shown no reluctance to step in and pull the plug. So that's written into the resolution, if that makes anyone feel any more comfortable. Having said that, now Sumner's turn.
Yes, I've got a couple issues. The first would be the idea of a release here. I do think that's a good idea, but I think Attorney Wachter would agree with me that that is not going to be a 100% solution here under any circumstances, because this is a novel event we're going through. So lawyers will do their best, but there's going to be some risks with this release as to its effectiveness. And where it really is going to be cause us a problem is the people that are most at risk from us having our teams play are not the players themselves. They're young kids. They're in good shape. They're likely to weather this, but it's this asymptomatic spread, which is extremely dangerous to the community. So if you get the mom and the dad and the son to sign off that we're going to play football this year, I think we're in pretty good shape as to that son and perhaps the mom and dad. But what about the other siblings who could be minors in the household? How about grandfather or grandmother who also lives in the household, or aunt or uncle who stops by, or neighbors who stop by? The asymptomatic spread is the danger to the community, and a release is not going to address that. We'd have to have everybody that goes through somebody's house sign off who is an adult, and also sign off on behalf of minor children. And when there's a risk of death, a release, there's limits to a release here. I think it would be effective as to the student and probably the parents, but there's going to be a lot of people, the ones most likely impacted. It's not going to be the 18-year-old. It's going to be the 60-year-old grandfather who could be seriously injured or die from COVID. That's the person that would not be releasing us, and we would be subject to a claim which I do not feel our liability coverage would cover. I would like Attorney Wachter to address to that. And then I have one more question for Mr. Polito.
Okay, I'll ask the solicitor to respond and come back to you, Sumner.
Thank you.
Our liability carrier does cover and would cover any claims relative to COVID. They've identified that. They've given that as the agent has given that to us in writing. We had that discussion again with him today. Neil and I had that discussion with him months ago as this was first starting, and their position has not changed, that we have liability coverage and there are no exclusions for pandemic or illness. With respect to the release, yes, the release is only as good as it is written, and the release is only good for those for who sign it. However, there are specific liability protections built into law for school districts and other government entities. We are immune from any such claims under the Political Subdivision Tort Claims Act, which are state claims, and the bar to a plaintiff having to being successful on federal claims is quite high. I would rather not have the discussion relative to where the vulnerabilities on that federal claim issue. I'd rather not have that discussion in a public session and limit that to executive session. Mr. Nichols would understand why. I will say that it is quite high for that bar to be reached. That same standard applies to whether it's the student or the neighbor who catches it from the student or the grandmother who catches it from the student who caught it while playing football, if they were able to prove that they in fact caught it while playing football. So yes, there is a risk. I believe that the school district is reasonably covered, is well covered by the insurance, reasonably sure of the liability position as a result of the various standards that I can discuss in executive session, and that a release will help mitigate any such concerns.
Sumner, I'll come back to you now, but I just want to say I agree with you that that's a very significant, important, and valid concern, and the solicitor has done his best to answer it. It is that, but if this does not pass, there's no need to have a discussion about waivers. But if this does pass after this meeting, since we're having an executive session anyway, we can delve into strategies on that or advice and questions on that. So it's a valid concern, but we don't need to talk about it until such time as we're doing it. And if you feel, or anyone feels strongly enough that they don't want to take that chance or that risk, certainly they have a right not to vote not in favor of this. So I want to say one other thing. I had a conversation with John Dahlstrand and then with Mr. Brockman about boys being at the bottom of a pile in a football practice or game, their faces being 2 inches away from other boys as they come out of the pile. And I asked about the transparent face shields that go within helmets. And Mr. Dahlstrand told me that the PIAA was going to require that. And I said to John, does that mean that if a district or a player does not have that within his helmet, that he can't play? And that was Mr. Dahlstrand's understanding. And I said, well, then it occurs to me that there could be shortages if the PIAA suddenly came out with that and school districts have to scramble to acquire those masks. But Neil told me this morning that we got a bit of luck, and their vigilance on this resulted in us receiving a shipment of those today, which should be adequate. So that's an important thing to consider, and at least in football, that there's players have played for a long time with those transparent shields within the helmet, and they're available to us now, and the PIAA apparently requires them. So Sumner, I promised you, and now it's your turn.
Okay. Yeah, I want to turn to the health and safety plan because the last I knew, when we had an incident with the football practice, we were told it would take 8 days for a test to turn around. And that is totally unacceptable for us to have a chance to check the spread. It's just too slow. The health department seems to be able to bring guns to bear when it comes to nursing homes. They're going in there and they're testing them all, but we are not getting that kind of attention. And I think that's a very serious concern that we should have. If we were looking at an 8-day turnaround on tests, it seems to me if somebody has any symptoms, we'd have to suspend, because an 8-day turnaround on a test is not going to stop this from spreading in our community. It's not anything that we are doing, but it seems that our access to resources is too limited. For example, are we going to be able to test all the staff or all the players or all the special ed children that come back at the beginning of school? Is there any extraordinary type assistance like that that we've been able to obtain, Mr. Polito?
We will not get any priority on testing, and if we do have a student that has symptoms and is sent home to be tested, we would certainly suspend the sport until we had results back. That's been our practice. It would continue to be our practice. As far as the delay on testing, again, I think that changes every day. Sometimes the tests, what they're telling us, come back very quickly, depending on what lab they use. Other times it's longer. So we would really need to defer to the Department of Health regarding that. We're not going to receive any priority on testing. However, the community centers did approach us, indicating that they do have some tests, and we're going to continue that conversation and see if there's a way we could work together to utilize that to ensure our community is safer than it is now.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you, Sumner. Anyone else on this? Roll call.
Mr. President?
Oh, Darlene.
Yeah, I just want to go on record as saying I'm really disappointed with the WPIAL on the way they've laid this out. They could have looked at what Brian is talking about, what Neil's talking about, what Jeremy's talking about, that there is a great risk to our students that are playing contact sports. Mostly, I'm concerned about our football players, and I'm concerned about our linemen. We know that one of the adverse effects to COVID is myocarditis, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's inflammation of the heart muscle. And when you think about a big lineman who's nose to nose and the face shields, that's a new revelation that we're just hearing about now. Will that be covering their nose and their mouth? So the respiratory particles will not be dispersed into the air. Daniil, do you know that?
Neil?
Neil speaking, he's muted.
Be patient. We got Neil muted. Don's.
I got it.
Works some magic.
I got it. So the face shields are plastic and they go along the bottom of the actual helmet. I'm looking right now to see if I have a picture of it. I had one sent to me today. So I'm going to see if I can bring that up and I can share my screen and you can at least take a look at what it looks like.
Darlene, I happen to share your opinion of the PIAA. I think they passed along a decision that they could have weighed in and done a more responsible job with, and frustrates me because I've seen them over the years never hesitate to lay a heavy hand on us when we appeal to them with unique circumstances for any of our athletes. So for what it's worth, I share your disappointment in their role in this.
So can everybody see my screen?
I see it, Neil, but it's with the reflection, it looks like it's the top.
Yeah, so the top is open. You can see if you follow along where the zip ties are, the zip ties indicate where that plastic shield has been joined to the helmet. And so it's just the bottom part of that mask.
Okay. And the full mask is more expensive and hard to get.
So these came in, this is what they're recommending, is that they recommend the bottom. We do know that they make other shields, visors that go above where the eyes are, and we can look into seeing if we can't double them up so that the entire front mask, the front of the mask is covered.
Probably worth a look, but if they're going to be in demand, we got to be realistic.
Well, I also think that's going to be a difficult situation for the football players because obviously that's going to cloud up. My son had a very serious eye injury in 7th grade, and so to play in soccer, and so to play basketball, he had to wear the goggles, and it was very frustrating for him. He could not see often, so I understand why they wouldn't want to put them over the eyes. So again, just go back to what I was saying, the frustration with the PIAA. They could have looked at postponing football. They could have looked at rescheduling it for the spring. Right now, as I look at our situation, there's only one other school district in the District 10 that has voted against having fall sports. We could possibly in the spring, Uniontown has voted not to play, Norristown's voted not to play, Reading's voted not to play, Harrisburg's voted not to play, Pittsburgh Public Schools have voted not to play, and then there's one school district in Philadelphia. That doesn't leave us with a whole lot of options for a spring sports season. So that is where my frustration comes in with the PIAA. And I have to agree with Governor Wolf that these activities are potential spreader events. And going back to what Brian said, we have a responsibility to our entire community, and our number one focus should be education. And I don't want to see anything happen to potentially keep us from opening back up again in November if we suddenly have an explosion of COVID cases because of the nature of this virus. So at this point, I'm frustrated. I feel for my former students. Some of them have reached out to me. I want them to be able to play. I want them to be able to have the opportunities for scholarships, but I don't believe that not playing is going to limit them as much as they believe it's going to limit them with their opportunities. And I keep going back and thinking about my parents' generation, which is often, Tom Brokaw said they were the greatest generation. I think about what my parents would say to me if I was a high school student right now and I was bemoaning not being able to play fall season. And I think they tell me to suck it up and that we are in the middle of a virus and that it's going, almost 180,000 people have died from this virus. And we have to be a community. We have to think about one another and not just about ourselves. So it breaks my heart. My vote breaks my heart because I love athletics and there's a lot to be learned from athletics, but there's also a lot to be learned right now about how we care for one another as a community. And we give some things up and we sacrifice because it's for the good of all.
Darlene, a vote in either direction on this is honorable, so everyone understands what's involved on each side. So either side is honorable, however this goes.
Mr. President?
Tom?
These are a couple of my thoughts here. One, we really do have to look at the holistic approach for our students. I mean, we're really sidelining them, no pun intended, with a lot this year between taking the kids out of face-to-face classes, all of the extras, homecoming dances and all those things. Now would not be a fun time to be in high school by any stretch. But when I'm thinking about the community here, just on Saturday, I was at a football game, like a Little Glitter football game at Roger Young Park. Hundreds of spectators there watching these cute little kids, little 6-year-old kids running around playing. And as I talked to the parents, they all were in favor of it. Obviously, they were there watching their children, watching their grandchildren, and they were bystanders, knowing the risk, assuming the risk, and they were very much engaged in the idea of watching their young children play. All summer long, I've been watching my son play baseball, and he's a catcher. I know people say, baseball is a non-contact sport, but be a catcher for a little bit. When you're between a batter, an ump, and yourself, they're all breathing on each other. And every game I go to, all the parents are there, grandparents are there, players are there. All of us parents, we all assume that risk. We think our children are better off for having activities other than sitting around at the house looking at a computer. I do know that in speaking with Darlene a little bit ago, there's some concerns, certainly even at the collegiate level, but I have a friend of mine whose son goes to Notre Dame, and I counseled with him the other day, and he said over 500 students at Notre Dame currently have COVID, and none of them are requiring hospitalization. They're being isolated, doing their own quarantine, if you will, but there aren't any health issues to the point that require hospitalization. I do agree that Tyler's been talking this whole time about the mental health of our students, and we certainly have to take, we have to take the children's mental health into mind. It's a whole lot to take away from them, with sports and everything else. And again, taking the holistic approach, it's not just sports, it's taking care of them all together. As far as delaying the schedules, delaying the schedule or the seasons, the other competition is playing now. You can't play football by yourself and nobody else is playing, so I don't think that's really an option. According to Brian, we do have guidance and we do have a plan, and according to Tim, we do have insurance. So I think that we can change all of the plan and the guidance as necessary, particularly with this waiver. I don't see a practical reason of why we would want to take something that is so important, sports and the other extracurriculars, away from our children. But I'm certainly in favor of sports. I think the children of all times need sports now more than ever. Thank you.
Okay, Tom. Anyone else?
Mr. President,
Gwen?
I have a question. We're talking about all this, but if other school districts are saying no to their fall sports, my concern is, who will Erie be playing?
When everybody in our area is going with it, Prep, McDowell, Harbor Creek, Girard, I think Corey. Mill Creek, I meant McDowell. Everybody's going for it. The city of Philadelphia is not, and I think the city of Pittsburgh is not, and they're certainly urban like we are, and that ought to give us pause, but everybody around us is going ahead. But
I'm just wondering because, far as our football team, I'm looking at what division we're in. Who are we playing? Sincerely, we have to look at who are we scheduling against. We're a powerhouse, so we're not playing these other school districts.
But we're not going to play the Canadian teams that have been scheduled. They're not allowed to cross the border, is my understanding. We may end up playing Prep and McDowell twice and looking around for some other opponents, but that all remains to be worked out if this is approved today. There's a lot that will have to be dealt with if this is approved today, and that includes things like Lori's concern about attendance at games and whether our television channel can highlight the kids' activities. All of that stuff hinges on whether we do this. So, we can work on those things later, but the question before us now is, are we going to proceed or cancel?
Mr. President.
I want to make sure, Gwen, you're done. First, Gwen. Are you done, Gwen?
Yes, I just have to ask that question because it's unclear of who are we playing? Who are we scheduling against?
Mr. President?
Fine.
Could I ask either Mr. Brockman or Mr. Misford to weigh in on that? I think they might have some more clarification.
Okay.
So I'll start, and then if I misspeak, Jeremy can jump in. My understanding is that the District 10 is asking all districts to answer a survey with whether or not they're playing or not. Based on the results of that survey, they are going to redo all of the region schedules. The PIAA has already made decisions on what postseason is going to look like, so that's already kind of taken care of. But considering this, Friday was supposed to be our first home varsity or first varsity football game, and that's already been delayed for 2 weeks, that they are going to redo all of the schedules for this season. Jeremy, did I miss anything?
No, you got everything there. It's pretty much all the schedules are null and void that were made prior to the start of the season this year. If we are in for sports this fall, the schedule is going to be more regionalized than it usually is for our school.
Okay, Gwen? I think Rose just asked to be heard, but I think I heard Angela also. Did I, Angela?
Yeah, you heard me. The only other thing that I had to say was I agree with Lori as far as I know that Governor Wolf, there's no spectators. I even believe I saw in some of the professional games that there was like no spectators. So that would be a question for me. Can our school district team actually attend the games and record them like how they do our school board meetings? So that would be
probably my question, is can we get our team that records in place on our station and put it on our YouTube channel and all that? Can we do that as well as live stream it on our Facebook page while the games are happening, so the students can see that they do have supporters? And that would be my only thing. And then as much as COVID, has caused so many different mixed emotions as it has hit our community, I do agree with Tom. If they're having games at Roger Young, they're having games and practice at different fields around town, and this is the only thing the kids are doing. I just feel like if they're being safe, at some point, we have to just worry about how we approach COVID versus running from it. So, once again, I'm gonna keep my my position. I do respect Darlene and everybody else's position, because trust me, it does worry and scare me. And Sumner, I appreciate your position too. It does worry and scare me, but moving forward, we just have to figure out ways to deal with COVID, because we can't run from COVID.
Thank you, Angela. Erica asked to be recognized, so I'll call on her. But as I just said a few minutes ago, the questions that Lori and you just mentioned about what happens if we do go forward and what happens at the games, we can deal with those, but I don't know that we can easily vote to change them abruptly and significantly. But those are things we can deal with if we decide to proceed. And if it hasn't already been said, I think cheerleaders at this point are not permitted to attend the games and do the cheering. That's another difficult thing to process. Erica?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to jump in quickly to say that we can certainly meet to talk about, I can meet with the whole communications crew to figure out how best we can either live stream or somehow videotape the games. There's a lot of questions and logistical issues around that, but we can certainly get together to talk about how best we can do that, and we can report back.
Thank you, Erica. Tyler, I'm aware that you asked to be recognized, but I brushed past Rose and it's her turn.
Okay, I just have a couple things to say. Mr. Superintendent, and am I hearing correctly that you would rather postpone the season and not have it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and am I also hearing that Mr. Brockman feels the same way? Mr. Brockman?
Yes.
And Mr. Missett feels the same way?
Well, we did prior to everything that was going on, since all the other schools in District 10 have proceeded to play for fall, kind of made us realize we might want to reconsider that. But there is definitely a high risk with our high contact sports.
But your professional opinion, Mr. Missett?
I would like to see our kids play at this point in time after what we've been going through for the last 3 weeks with our health and safety plan and our coaches and players following those procedures. And I think the waiver will definitely help that as well. From all the feedback that I've been getting from the coaches and the players, they're gung-ho and they definitely want to play and proceed with the fall season. I haven't heard one word from anybody that does not want to play. We did look at postponing till the spring, but there would be nobody to play if that was the case at this point in time. So that's why we're meeting today, so we can probably or hopefully be a part of the fall schedules.
We appreciate your comments, Jeremy, Neil, and Brian. Each of you are thoughtful, caring people and very involved with this. And even though you disagree, you come from a position of honor and concern. So thank you. Tyler?
I guess here's where, just listening to everybody talk, my concern lies. My concern lies that this being high risk, that if the numbers do increase, that puts us in a space where we go into the red zone. And what happens in the red zone, all schools shut down. So everybody will lose services at that point, especially our most vulnerable kids. I'm thinking of our kids who are in our supportive needs, special needs classes, specifically our kids who may be getting the services that we argued so hard for at our last session on the autism spectrum. If those kids lose their services, where does that place the rest? Where does this place the rest of the district if we move our school into the red zone? I fully believe in athletics, what it does for the mental health, the well-being of a youth, for families. Coming from a very athletic family myself, I saw what it did just with the connections and the bonds that happened between family members who are at sports events cheering for their youth. And additionally, I feel that it is our responsibility as a district to take in all students. And I'm most worried about if our numbers continue to rise. They will. If we go into contact sports, I think it's inevitable. That will happen. We will kind of light a flame. That the rest of the students who are in incredibly vulnerable situations are then going to lose all the services that the district has worked so hard to move us up for these kids to get. So that is my concern moving forward with athletics.
That's a valid concern, but having heard what the superintendent said, Tyler, I feel comfortable that knowing that he has serious concerns and hasn't shown reluctance in the past to step in and pull the plug or change direction, I have confidence that he would continue to do that. And before there being a major outbreak, I want to believe, and I choose to believe, he would step in at the first notice of serious developments. So what you just said is very valid, and I reconcile in my own mind with the way I just said. I have faith in the administration. They've shown vigilance and attentiveness to everything through this, so I take comfort in that.
Can I also add, I guess my other additional thing is I don't want to leave the administration out on their, not that I don't trust them. I fully do trust them. What I'm saying is I don't want for us to all shift the responsibility of this decision solely on Brian. I don't want this to become something that Brian now has to carry the burden for. Not that I don't feel like he's capable of doing that. I just don't, us as a board, want to abandon somebody if he is saying that he doesn't feel comfortable with this, and that we don't unify in that sense. Not saying that we have to. That's my.
I wondered about that and concerned about it too, Tyler. It occurs to me what happened is the governor allowed it to be passed to the PIAA. They passed it to all of the districts individually, and now we're passing it to the superintendent and the parents. So it's it's just, as Darlene said, the PIAA could have done everyone a better service. But Darlene, I think Darlene requested first, Gwen, and then you, okay?
All right.
Darlene?
Just a quick question. So, Brian, what you're saying though is that you believe that non-contact sports are safe, correct?
Yes.
And because other school districts in the District 10 did not go to a different model where they just did the non-contact sports and approved that, we're stuck right now with a decision of all or none. Is that correct? Because of what the rest of District 10 has decided? Or could we at some point go back and say that those non-contact sports could still play?
Well, and I certainly understand, that concern with the sports and Jeremy's position, although this is the first time I'm hearing his change of heart. My overall issue is safety. We as a board have had multiple discussions about bringing students into school and having them sit 6 feet apart and have expressed concerns about that. Even providing parents an option to do that, we've been uncomfortable with doing that, again, provided that we have the proper ventilation. So I personally cannot, feel comfortable with the concept of having them play sports. And as John has mentioned, going into a pileup, I just don't see how that complies with the requirements that have been provided by the CDC and the Department.
Gwen?
Yes, I just have a question. We're doing all this talk about football, but we do have other fall sports. What's being done for them?
Good point, Gwen. I think the volleyball players and soccer players might be wanting to wear masks, but I think some of this was addressed in that health and safety plan. Football, I guess, draws attention for the reasons the superintendent just said. At the bottom of a pile, there's usually 5 or 6 fellas breathing in each other's face for a few seconds. So that's why the attention to football, I suppose, is probably the most risky, but you're right to be concerned about the other sports. Does anybody want to respond to that? Brian or Neil?
Yes, and when I say contact sports, I'm talking about any of those sports that players are getting close to each other and are forced to be within 6 feet of each other. So that would include volleyball and soccer. And also there is some concern about cross country, just because there's a lot of breathing and students sometimes do pile up together during that type of event.
Mr. President,
Tom,
just allow for my second go at it here. One, I appreciate Jeremy. I appreciate your point of view and speaking up. And Brian, we always rely on you, but and we appreciate you. I just disagree with you in this case. I do like that, as you mentioned, we can make changes in our plan as we go. We can make changes in the season as we go. We can make changes as you see necessary. So we have to keep that certainly in mind, that we don't have a plan that's going to stay with us for the entirety of the season. We can change it as necessary. And finally, just speaking as a father, I have a son that this year will be playing baseball and golf. Not that I just want him to play because he can play in other leagues, but I feel if I felt for one moment that my son or my family was at risk from him playing a contact sport, which I guess baseball would be, I wouldn't be attending the games, and I certainly wouldn't let him play. But I personally do not feel, as I had a conversation just with my physician just yesterday, because I value her opinion more than I do, to be honest, any more of yours. And she recommended that she would allow her own children to play. And she did not feel that there was a significant pose to my son's health. So for that reason, I wish we'd all consider what the medical professionals are saying and not necessarily what we are saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Many of you have already spoken twice. I'll just ask one more time. Anyone who hasn't, if they want to speak a second time, now we'll proceed to the roll call, and whatever the roll call is, we'll deal with it after that. Roll call.
Ms. Sheridan?
Yes.
Mr. Spagel?
Yes.
Tyler Titus?
No.
Ms. Cooley?
No.
Mrs. Feeney?
No.
Mrs. McNair?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
No.
Ms. Pickens?
Yes.
Mr. Harkins?
Yes, it passes. I want to say, though, I respect everyone's thoughts and concerns. Everyone came up from a position of concern and was informed, and it was a difficult question we'll ever deal with here. But as I said, I'm comfortable that the superintendent won't hesitate to interfere if he recognizes early signs of a serious change in circumstances. Mr. Solicitor, do we need to deal with the third resolution that you wrote, or was that to fall back on?
That was a fallback option to definitively make the decision for the school board. At this point, if there is no motion and second, the motion shall not proceed.
Well, I would rule that we don't need to consider a motion to cancel what we just did because we don't have any reason to. But I will ask in a minute for if there's any other matter which anybody wants to discuss publicly, but then we need to have an executive session on at least one personnel issue. So I'm going to need everybody that's able to stick around for that. So I'll ask at this point, is there any other matter which any director wishes to bring up at this time?
Yes,
Sumner?
I think we're all aware that this can explode very quickly. I think the city in total is still in the yellow. And now we have the Catholic schools have already convened. We're going to get some notice before we start conducting classes as to how they are faring. But we have to be on our guard that this can get away from all of us very quickly. And we are expecting to bring back, I think, between special needs and the vocational students, close to 1,000 students and staff. And just having these groups together in enclosed spaces is a risk to the community. So we've got to be vigilant and be ready to turn quite quickly if this goes against us, because we don't have the support of the health department as to here. Their priorities lie elsewhere. I'm not sure why, but they do. Nursing home residents aren't out in the community. All our students are, and so they're a bigger risk. Notre Dame may have 500 students in dormitories. Our 500 students go home every day. So it's a large risk to the community. We're all aware of it. We're all aware that this virus keeps being underestimated by everybody, and everybody looks pretty bad after a while. So we've all been working on this, and it's important that we remain vigilant. But I still think that we should not have any in-person classes starting at the beginning of the school year. Thank you.
Okay, Senator.
Mr. President?
Darlene?
Yes, I just want to take a moment to reach out to our student athletes and to the families and the parents and to remind them that you have a responsibility now. And we have a lot of faith in you. We know that you do care about this community, but we also know that your minds are not wired to be fearful of your mortality right now. But there are many people in this community that are fearful of their mortality. And so we're asking you to be safe, and we're asking you to be responsible to the community and do the right thing. You know, don't succumb to peer pressure and listen to your coaches. And there's no I in team. So we're all in this together, and let's make this, now that we voted for you to go ahead and play your fall sports season, let's make it the best fall sports season we can, but also with a reminder that you also have a responsibility to your community. Your community has now supported you, and it's your turn to come back and support your community.
And I'll piggyback on that, Darlene. Along with that, it's in their best interest to comply with what their coaches and teachers tell them, because they'll jeopardize their own chances for the season to continue if it gets out of hand, at which time the superintendent would pull the plug. So they must realize, and as you said, suck it up and recognize the seriousness of how they behave and conduct themselves at every moment through this, until such time as it might become a problem. Anyone else before we go to executive session?
Yes, Mr. President. I just wanted to say that I agree with the concerns in general. I have those same concerns as everybody else has. I'm trying to be safe and keep my mask on because I'm in a car dealership, but I have the same concerns that everybody else has. I am very nervous about sending my twins on September 8th. And even though I have committed to sending them, I'm still second guessing, because as a school board director, yes, I want all the special education students there first. But as a mother, I still am worried about the safety of all the children, including my own, who cannot verbalize how they feel or what they think. So with that being said, I just hope that we're keeping track of the schools that have already started. I don't even know if, Brian has the connection with the health department or whoever else, or even with others, the Catholic schools or whoever, the charter schools who's already started to see if, COVID has had any impact on the start of their school years, to determine on, the process of how we're going to start our school year, seeing that they're already into it. And some school districts have started even before this week. So maybe kind of, reach out to some of those school districts and see has, COVID affected them in any type of way. And I'm just letting everybody know, like, I know that the community wanted the sports to happen. And I know that, I very much push for the special education students to be in the classrooms, but I am ready to pull the plug at the drop of a dime. Anything gets any worse, anything gets any more risky, I will be the first one on Brian's line and everybody else's line saying, pull the plug. I don't care who feels some type of way. If we get into the first week of school and stuff is just getting crazy and our cases are high, I will be on everybody's line. I'm just letting you know. It's not about me contradicting myself or about me flip-flopping. It's about safety. And I will be on everybody's line asking for the plug to be pulled on sports, in person, and anything else that has to do with putting the kids at any more risk than they already are at.
Okay, now that we've gotten past this point where we are going to proceed as of now to permit sports and extracurriculars to happen, there are problems to solve that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So we, among them, the things we discussed about bringing recognition and trying to do something about attendance, if at all possible, for mom and dad or cheerleaders. So anyway, well, those are things we can now attempt to address. And I did make that suggestion. If it interests anyone, I have the name of an infectious disease specialist from St. Vincent's, and I've been advised that Hammett has similar people. I just remind everyone that that's a suggestion made to me by a citizen, that we consider bringing someone like that in to take a look at our procedures. If anyone wants to include that as a step forward. Is there anything else before we go to executive session? Can we have a motion to adjourn this special meeting?
Mr. President, I make motion to adjourn.
I second it.
Moved by Mr. Spiegel, second by Ms. Sheridan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Meeting adjourned. I want to thank everyone for being so cooperative, understanding, tolerant, flexible, and respectful of each other. It's on either side of this. There was a lot of serious concerns that we all continue to have, but we navigated through it. I'm proud of us. We'll take a 5-minute break and go to executive session for at least one personnel issue. And we can discuss the waivers that we talked about or begin that discussion. So let's resume at 2:25. It's 2:18 right now. Thank you.